Ayy, look, yeah, ayy. I'm in the lab like Dexter, brand new batch he tested. I'm with all the extras, don't try and bitch, I'm pressure. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the New Media Podcast. I'm your host, Ya. We hope you enjoyed the last episode because, as always, today's going to be an even better episode. I got the whole crew with me. Everybody's in the house today. And today, very similar to what we did midway through the first round of the NBA playoffs, we're just going to be doing a little bit of a recap of what's going on and what things, and we'll highlight some things that we've learned so far in this series and give our takeaways about that. So before we jump into today's topics, temperature check, how's everybody doing today?
Man, I've been loving these playoffs. We're getting huge performances across the board.
I'm happy. Late show, man. We feeling good going into game 4, so I can't be more happier than that, man. Let's go.
It's been an amazing playoff so far. You know, second round even better than the first round. But of course, let's go ahead and jump right into it, man. We'll talk about the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Boston Celtics first. That series is now tied up at 2-2 apiece, going back to Boston for Game 5 on Tuesday, I believe. So, of course, what have you learned so far from that series?
Like this series has been genuinely confusing, especially if you're a Sixers fan. I mean, you know, Game 1, you come in there with no expectation of winning that game, and James Harden has an absolute monster performance. He puts up 45 on the road in Boston, and you know, suddenly there's hope for the Sixers. I mean, they had no expectation of that. I think the Celtics offensively were great in that game, but defensively they really struggled containing James Harden. Then in the next game, you go on and, you know, they absolutely blow them out. After the first, I want to say after the second quarter, Boston really settled in, and then they just started hitting shots. Philadelphia wasn't able to get anything going. You know, that was Embiid's return game. You know, so he's a little rusty offensively. And then Game 3, again, James Harden really struggled in games 2 and 3, which is night and day from his Game 1 performance. So those two games in Game 2 and 3, like he struggled to get anything going, especially Game 3. I think Game 3 was really puzzling if you're watching that game. I mean, he just looked lost offensively, looked sluggish. It was almost like a Ben Simmons-esque kind of performance in the playoffs where it just felt like he didn't get to any of his actions that he wanted to. I think Embiid was really good in that game, and Tyrese Maxey has been struggling to find his footing in this series as well, and they weren't able to get contributions from anyone else. And so, you know, that game they won that the Celtics as well. And then Game 4, I mean, James Harden, again, just a huge performance. You know, he took it upon himself that he had to be better. And again, in this game, he was better. And it's crazy because these are probably his 2 best performances I've ever seen from him in the playoffs. And, you know, he really put that out there. Then Embiid, you know, outside of that fourth quarter, he was relatively good in this game. And so right now they're saying 2-2. If you had told me this 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have believed it. But, you know, if you're a Celtics fan, if you're a Sixers fan, sorry, you should be happy so far with the result of this series. You shouldn't be happy with the way that game ended. They generally should have blown out Boston if they had really locked in. But, you know, they came away with the dub. And, you know, right now the series is sitting at 2-2, and they're giving themselves a fighting chance. But, you know, this next game, I think Embiid has to take it upon himself to win them a game. I think, you know, James Harden has given them 2 games already with his incredible shot making, but Embiid has to go out and get him a game. So,
Yeah, man. The series started off with a vintage Harden performance. You know, he had a big shot down the line, and you know, without Embiid that game one, a lot of people thought the Celtics were going to come in, you know, cook up and you know have a big lead, but it was a different story that first game, and Harden showed up, but Game 2, Game 3, like I said, it was a different story. You know, he had no lift in his shot. He wasn't finishing layups. He looked completely lost on the court. You know, so I think the first game he shot 3 for 14, and the second game was like 2 for 11. So he only made 5 shots in those 2 games, and it wasn't looking nice, even though Embiid came back for Game 2 and 3. But Game 4, a different story for them. You know, Harden again making a big shot in the corner to give him the lead and give him the lead and give him a chance to win the game, and that's what happened. But for the Celtics, for me, is the inconsistency of Jason Tatum, man. You know, one game he goes off, and the next game they win by 40, and he goes he goes 1 for 7. That game has 7 points, and in this game, the whole first half, 1 for 9. He made some shots down the line in the fourth, but other than that, his inconsistency going to these games, I feel like, you know, they could be up 3-1, maybe, you know, end the series soon, but him not showing up a couple of these games in the series is kind of different to me. And same as Jaylen Brown, you know, him not, you know, getting the touches in the fourth quarter, him, you know, deferring to Brogdon, him deferring to Marcus Smart, letting them take the shots down the line. I thought these guys, Tatum, Brown, 1A, 1B, they're supposed to be taking the big shots, but they're settling to Marcus Smart taking game-winning shots or him getting buzzer beater shots. So for me, series going 2-2, I feel like the Celtics could perform better. And I feel like Embiid has to come down in the stretch of the game and show up. This game 4 against Horford down the line in the fourth, he got clamped a lot of the possessions. He was missing shots. He was, getting blocked, and it was looking bad. But he made a big pass to Harden in the corner that kind of saved him. So, down the line 2-2, I feel like Celtics, if they can shape up, they got a great chance of winning the series. But Embiid and Harden keep on clicking, and they get this consistency from Harden. It might be a different series. So we'll see what happens.
Well, for me, the one thing I've taken away from this entire series is so far I would have never thought in my wildest dreams James Harden would be saving Joel Embiid's legacy right now in a series versus a tough matchup versus the Boston Celtics, a team they haven't had success against them necessarily. And so after Abdi took his victory lap after game 1, Harden came back down to earth. He had those 2 stinker games in games 2 and 3, but in this game 4, he took it upon himself to be better, and that's exactly what happened. He played tremendous from start to finish. It was really aggressive early on, which he pretty much got himself into rhythm, and he didn't take his foot off the gas after that. But for me, outside of the 76ers issues, with Joel Embiid, of course he's injured and stuff like that, but this is, like Abdi said, this is another game where I thought they should have blown these guys out of the water. But this championship contending team Celtics, these guys know how to compete, know how to stay in games, know how to hit some tough shots. And even with Tatum struggling in the first half, I think the lead was maybe about like 10 or 11 points. So the game was still in reach going into halftime, and their best player is not performing up to their standards. And so I thought there at some point the Sixers are going to put their foot on the gas and kind of just blow these guys out of the water and have their 2 main guys, James Harden and Joel Embiid, sit for majority of the fourth quarter, but that wasn't the case. But Jaylen Brown, for me, he had an amazing first half, and I'm over here I'm thinking this guy's just going to carry that into the second half, and he was doing this in foul trouble. He picked up 2 stupid fouls in the beginning of that first quarter in game 4, and next thing you know, he's still putting his foot on the gas, still getting downhill, still getting buckets. But in that second half, pretty much was a no-show. They got contributions from guys like Malcolm Brogdon, Marcus Smart, and even Al Horford hit some big shots down the stretch. But Jaylen Brown, a guy who I consider to be a 1B partnership with Jason Tatum being the 1A, was a clear-cut number 2 in this game. And he took a huge backseat, and for him to only be taking 3 shots in that second half, I believe, and none in overtime, it's just disappointing. And then for him to come out and say, I need to find my shot a lot better, be more aggressive and something like that in the post-game conference. Well, I mean, it's easy to say that, but when you're in the moment, you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to do, and you're not doing it. It's kind of like, it's on you to do that. And so I believe the Celtics will be a lot better. I feel like, this is probably going to be their wake-up call. They let game 1 slip in a game where they were supposed to win and protect home court without Joel Embiid on the floor, and they didn't do that. But they were able to, steal home court in game 3 in Philly, and I feel like they could have walked out of game 4 and going back into Boston up 3-1, but that's not the case in this situation. So I think in game 5 they'll settle in, they'll lock in, protect their home floor once again, and then I think coming back to Philly, a place that they've had much success at, I think they'll probably close out this series then. But for the 76ers, in order to stop that, they got to be better defensively. They can't let these guys just hang around and in these games where you're supposed to just keep your foot on the gas and kind of close this thing out down the stretch. So I'm not expecting James Harden to have any type of performance like that again, where he's putting up 40 points. He might have that a couple games from now, but specifically in game 5, I think they'll do a great job at trying to put a lot of emphasis on him defensively, try to take him away, force him to take bad shots, throw some double teams at him, make him really be the facilitator that he is now in his career. But Joel Embiid has to be a lot better. Game 5 is a huge game, which can go in either or's favor. It doesn't matter if the Sixers are on the road. I think they still have enough talent to come away, in this series and come away with a road win, just like they did in game 1. But if they want to do that, Embiid has to lead the way. Tyrese Maxey, a guy who struggled, he's been struggling ever since game 1. He's got to be able to get it going once more, and they got to have some contributions coming off their bench. And so overall, not too much. This has been a very, very interesting series so far between these two teams. But I think the Celtics are still in good shape. These guys still show why they have their championship DNA, and even though they haven't won last year, they're showing once again why they're the clear-cut favorites coming out of the Eastern Conference. But With that being said, we'll go ahead and move on to the next series. We have the Miami Heat and the New York Knicks. This series right now sits at 2-1 piece between. I think the Miami Heat were able to win Game 3, and they're able to steal Game 1. The New York Knicks were able to win Game 2. So what are we taking away from this series?
I suppose adjustments have been incredible. I think he's done an excellent job at forcing the New York shooters to be able to shoot the ball. I mean, game 1 he had initially Jimmy Butler on Jalen Brunson, and then they were just gapping. First half it was more so Brunson was cooking, and then the second half we did a much better job of shading over on Brunson and forcing guys like Josh Hart and Obi Toppin to shoot because Julius Randle was missing that game. And so they found it a bit of a struggle. I mean, RJ Barrett in that second half in the game 1, he kind of went missing, and then Jalen Brunson, he was kind of cooking, but he wasn't able to really get his shooters going, and he wasn't really doing well from the 3-point line in that game. And then game 2, Jimmy Butler, of course, we know he was out with the ankle injury, and even then, it was still a close contest till the end of that game, till like 2 minutes in. And then I want to say roughly that stretch where it was just like the last 5 minutes is where the missing star showed up. The lack of Jimmy Butler was apparent because nobody was able to create their own shot. You had guys like Caleb Martin and Gabe Vincent trying to get up their shots, and it just wasn't happening. And then I want to say game 3, it was a huge difference again on Brunson. He shot I think 7 of 20, and Julius Randle, I mean, I don't think he's cracked 20 on good efficiency once in any playoff game, like ever. Never once has he cracked 20 points on good efficiency. He might have even ever cracked I think
game 2 he had.
Game 2 he had 26, right?
I think it was 8 for 18, 25 points.
Yeah, so yeah. I don't think he's cracked 30 points. That might be it. 30 points, yeah. 30 points. He hasn't had a single game 30 points. And then Jalen Brunson was struggling in that game, and the adjustment was Gabe Vincent on Jalen Brunson, and shading over again. Josh Hart, he's just not good. Miami Heat will live with Josh Hart shooting that corner 3. We're gonna live with that. We're gonna live with guys. And Julius Randle hasn't been able to have success on Bam. I mean, the matchup, I think he was 1 for 9 when Bam was guarding him. I mean, I think Bam did a phenomenal job on every single person that he switched out on, and it just shows his level of defensive versatility. So, I'm happy about this series. I genuinely didn't expect this because I thought Tibbs would do a much better job of at least adjusting towards Jimmy Butler, but it's like guys are hitting shots, and then the defense is really getting to the Knicks, and they haven't been able to get to the 3-point shot. So, I'm happy with this series so far.
Man, Miami, man, I feel like they could have been up 3-0, just that game 2 missing Jimmy Butler, it could have been a big difference. They're losing by 6. It wasn't much. Like I just said, the star effect. If Jimmy Butler was there, it could have been a different story. But for me, it's the physicality of Miami, the way they play defense, and the way they've been playing on Brunson, and the way they've been playing on Randle as well. And it's looking great for them. They're shutting down the key players down the stretch, and the 2 games they won, Jimmy Butler's been playing effective. Guys like Kyle Lowry, guys like Struss, guys like Gabe Vincent, the role players showing up each of these games. They're hooping. Guys like Bam playing fantastic defense, even contributing on the offense. So feel like for me, the 3 games that these guys played, Miami just been the much better team. Spo's been the better coach. Defensively, they've been better. Physicality, they've been better, and offensively, they've been better. It's just for me that game 2, missing Jimmy Butler could have been the different story. So going into game 4, I felt like Miami has a great chance of going up 3-1. I feel like they got the momentum. Guys like Randle, it's just, bar that second game, all playoffs, he's been shooting horrible. Bad games, 8 for 22, 7 for 23, 7 for 24, 4 for 15. He's not there, and he's not the second star that Brunson, came to New York to play with. You feel me? So guys like RJ Barrett, they got to step up. Josh Hart, he's sitting in the corner, he's got to hit that 3, but he hasn't been hitting it all series. So they're leaving him open. And Mitchell Robinson, the guy that showed up against the Cavs, I feel like he's been a non-factor against the Heat. They completely take him out the game. He's not, getting a lot of offensive rebounds. They're not getting a lot of second chances, opposed to like they got the first series. So that goes to Miami's physicality. Miami's being the better team right now, and I feel like they go up 3-1 in game 4.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I haven't watched much of this series outside of game 1, but after rewatching some highlights from game 2 and game 3, the one thing that's shown for me and that I've taken away from this is the fact that the New York Knicks aren't matching the level of physicality being put on display from the Miami Heat. One thing that gave them the edge in that Cavaliers series was how physical they were with them. You know, Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle really made it a point to play bully ball with their two bigs, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, and I feel like that hasn't carried over into this series. And the reason why I gave the Knicks the edge was because of Julius Randle, and Julius Randle wasn't able to go in game one, but he's been able to play in these last two games. Hasn't really been doing much. And for game two, yeah, it's all right. He had a decent performance. He was solid for himself. But I feel like in a game where you don't have Jimmy Butler, you're playing against a team without Jimmy Butler. You're supposed to really blow that team off the floor. And for them not to do that and to really keep the game close and to have to hit some key shots down the stretch, it's a little bit disappointing. Jimmy Butler sitting there on the sidelines, nodding his head like, you know, he knows the situation. And I think it was very smart by the Miami Heat to sit him in that game too, have him rest up on that ankle and just have him be close to at least 80% going into game three. And it paid off in their favor. They're able to come out in game three and pretty much blow these guys out off the floor, winning this game by a margin of 19. And so I think we just need to start having a discussion about Julius Randle as a whole and who he is come playoff time. This has been this is 2-year sample size now where Julius Randle has gone into the playoffs as a top guy, and he hasn't played up to his expectation, his standards. And you know, for him to come out in game three, 38 minutes, 10 points and 14 rebounds, that's just downright disappointing, man. This guy has to be better. And I thought with him coming back into the lineup in game two, although they did win game two, I thought that was just what their win, their momentum carrying over to Miami was going to be just enough for them to win game three, at least still a game, which they still have the potential to do so. But in this specific game, it didn't show whatsoever. And I think Jalen Brunson, although he struggled a little bit, I think Tibbs needs to just allow guys like, you know, Josh Hart to come off the bench. I'm not too sure who they'll slide into that role, but it could be a guy like Quentin Grimes, who they've trusted throughout the course of this season. But Josh Hart is more known to be a guy who comes off the bench, a sixth man, and who plays at least starter minutes, of course. But to have him be out there in the corner shooting 3-pointers you're playing into the Miami Heat's hand, and that's what Spoelstra wants you to do. He wants guys like you know, RJ Barrett, guys like, you know, Quentin Grimes, quickly Josh Hart, Obi Toppin to shoot those threes, which will allow them, you know, the Miami Heat to grab the board and push the pace in their favor. And so for the New York Knicks, they just have to bring the physicality into game four. You know, obviously the series isn't over yet, but they do have to regain home court advantage. And you know, the Miami Heat, man, you know, I believe in that game one, you know, Kevin Love turned back the clock. He was throwing full court passes, looking like the best quarterback in New York at the time. And, you know, it was just enough for them to win that game. You know, Jimmy Butler went down with the ankle injury, but he was still able to finish out that game one. And my question coming out of that game one was why, you know, they weren't just doubling whoever had the ball in that situation in the fourth quarter, whether it was Kyle Lowry or Bam or anybody of that sort, because Jimmy Butler was just sitting there in the corner, you know, practicing corner threes, because we all know he couldn't necessarily move out there on the floor. But for the keys for the Knicks going into game four, they got to be better defensively. They got to be better physically. They got to be able to match the Miami Heat's physicality out there on the floor. Julius Randle has to be better. At some point, this guy has to show up in this series, and that's my whole reason for the New York Knicks winning this series was based on Julius Randle being fully healthy, or not even healthy, just being out there for the New York Knicks. And he's out there, he's not producing, and he has to be better. And so I think he'll be better going forward. But this is going to be tough for this New York Knicks team to win if they don't necessarily play defense like they did in that first series versus Cleveland. But now we go ahead and move on to the Denver Nuggets and the Phoenix Suns series. Coming out of Denver, the Nuggets were up 2-0. They protected home court, but now coming out of Phoenix, this series is tied 2-2 apiece. But behind two masterclass performances from Devin Booker. Of course, KD pitched in as well. But what have we taken away from this series?
The shot making from Devin Booker has been just downright like ridiculous at this point. It's laughable. The level of shot making that we're seeing in this playoff series. I mean, you have Jokic on one end putting up 50 bombs and 40 bombs, and then on the other hand, you have Devin Booker putting up 40 pieces. It's just the level of shot making that's on display right now, and these star versus star battles has just been amazing in these playoffs, and especially in this series. I mean, you know, Denver, the first two games you get a performance from Jamal Murray, and then of course Jokic, he performed, and then game three, you know, Devin Booker really settles in and he does what he does, and everything that he's been doing this entire playoffs. I mean, these guys were getting to any shot that they liked, and you know, it felt like they came out with a sense of urgency in that game three that they really need to win. The only guy that didn't really come out with a sense of urgency from that side is, you know, DeAndre Ayton, but I got to give him credit for that game four. Even if Jokic had 51, I mean, just the level of activity that he had on the offensive glass, and just he was moving really well on defense, and he was finishing off plays. I think he did a much better job of just coming out with some level of like, I got to perform out there. I can't be letting my teammates down. And they got contributions from Landry Shamet coming off the bench and Jock Landell, and it seems like even if we do say that the Suns' depth isn't there, and they are playing like 45 minutes, like what can you really do when two guys are combining for like 70? Like, is there anything that you can really do? And again, the NBA is about role players showing up at home and showing up away. The Nuggets role players haven't been there at Phoenix. Michael Porter Jr., I mean, what was that shot in transition? Like, I just don't understand the logic in taking that shot. Aaron Gordon, game 3, I think, has 0 points in the first half. Like, the role players just haven't been there for the Nuggets, and the Suns role players are showing up. So, the keys for game 5 is, the role players showing up for Denver. They have to come out and hit their shots. MPJ, I am expecting a good game from him in this game 5 because they are at home. This is Mile High. I think the altitude, again, is going to affect the Suns, which we saw in game 1 and game 2. But, if Devin Booker is putting up these 40 bombs, like at some point it's going to be tough to outscore him. Even if you're Jokic, I think they're living with the fact that if Jokic gets 50 and every other guy that we stay home on shooters and they're not doing anything, we'll live with that. The only guy that I seen getting off clean shots outside of Jokic was Jamal Murray. And, early on he was 6 for 15 and then, he's kind of settled into the game. So the keys are the Denver role players have to show up in this game 5. So.
Yeah, to me, the first game and the second game, first game, Jamal Murray played fantastic. He showed up. He had some big key shots in that game 1. In the second game, they played defensively well. Murray didn't have too well of a game, but Jokic, he showed up that second game for them, and he carried them. Defensively, they showed up, But that second game, I think Devin Booker had 39, if I'm not correct. He balled out that second game, but guys like A and Chris Paul, guys on the bench, they were not showing up. And then game 3 and 4, I felt like both games, the bench has outscored Denver Nuggets bench and their role players. And I feel like that's Monty making some key adjustments, switching, bringing on some different players from the bench and playing Terrence Ross and TJ Warren and Shamet that game 4, in the fourth quarter, 4 big threes. And that's key to that because Booker and KD, those two guys offensively going down the stretch, unstoppable. So they got a double team and they're leaving guys like Shamet open in the corner. He's making big shots. And for the Nuggets, for me, offensively, sometimes you can settle, you can be happy with Jokic getting that 50 bomb or that 45 bomb, and other guys like Michael Porter Jr. not showing up, guys like Aaron Gordon not playing to what they're supposed to play. Like Aaron Gordon, I feel like the last 3 games to me hasn't been playing well, bar the first game that he showed up. But other than that, guys coming off the bench, Jeff Green playing 20 minutes, and he's not scoring the ball for them. Bruce Brown coming off the bench scoring 3 points, he's not putting none on the table for them. And it's tough, guys like KCP are not hitting their threes down the lane, and it's just a 2-man show with Jokic and Murray. And I feel like offensively, a 2-man show going against KD and Book with their role players and the bench players showing up. That's why they won game 3 and game 4. So, like Abby said, game 5, Denver, they got to make some adjustments. Defensively, they can't double too much and leave, shooters open in the corner. And I feel like, they got to get MPJ involved more early in the game. Guys like Aaron Gordon, MPJ, and KCP, they get their shot going. It's going to make it easier for Jamal Murray and Jokic. So, it's a good series going forward. I thought after 2-0 it was going to be done, but the Suns came back and fought. So we'll see what happens, and let's see what happens in Denver.
I mean, if I'm on the Denver Nuggets, my takeaway from these last couple of games and so far in this series is, regardless of the situation, I think they're still in good shape. I'm still in good shape. That's probably the mindset they're going in to game 5 with, going back home. Because we look across every series, we look at Boston and Philly, we look at Golden State, Los Angeles, we look at Knicks and Miami. There's been at least one convincing win in each and every series. But in this specific series, I feel like we haven't seen that yet. The Denver Nuggets did a great job at protecting home court. And if I'm a Phoenix Suns fan, of course, there's a lot of pressure going into game 3. You want to do your part and protect home court as well. But they did that, but not in the fashion I was expecting, because I thought these guys were going to come into game 3 and game 4, or at least in one of these games, and just blow the Denver Nuggets out of the water, and just, not even make it a game where, Jokic and Murray have an opportunity to, seal the deal and steal a game on the road. But, they kept it close, and it's tough, because I thought the Phoenix Suns with Devin Booker and KD were going to be able to do that. And so the Denver Nuggets in both of these games, I felt like they had opportunity to at least win one of them. It sucks that they weren't able to do that, but at the end of the day, the Phoenix Suns, they did what they were supposed to do. They went into Denver. They came out of Denver at 0-2, and they had an opportunity to protect home court themselves, and that's exactly what they did. But I'm not too sure how confident I'd be going back to Denver for Game 5 with how they played throughout this course of this series, because obviously Devin Booker and Kevin Durant have been great. And Chris Paul went down with the injury, I believe, in Game 2, and he's not going to be back for about another week. And so, what's it going to take for the Phoenix Suns to steal a road game in Denver? Because, of course, as we all know, the series doesn't begin until a team wins on the road, and both of these teams haven't been able to do that. But I feel like the Denver Nuggets are in better shape to do that. They're if there's a team that can win a road game in this series, I would put my money on Denver to steal a game for sure. So, the Denver Nuggets had an opportunity to win in Game 3. They rallied back in that third quarter. They took the lead at one point, I believe, 81-80 or something like that, and late in the third quarter. But down the stretch in that game, my question mark was on Jamal Murray. I feel like although he had it going in that game, I feel like in that fourth quarter he ran out of gas, and his shots weren't falling for him. He wasn't getting his legs up from under him, and Jokic had it going in that fourth quarter. So I feel like if Jamal Murray just deferred to Jokic in that fourth quarter, the outcome would have been completely different. But Jamal Murray not being able to hit a perimeter jump shot down the stretch in that fourth quarter really hurt the Denver Nuggets' chances of winning Game 3. But at the end of the day, they were still in good shape going into this Game 4. And the reason why they lost this Game 4, if we're just being completely honest, is Landry Shamet going off in that fourth quarter and finishing the game with 19 points. I believe this guy hasn't scored more than 7 points the entire postseason, and for him to have a fourth quarter outburst where he hit about 4 3-pointers, it's just it's embarrassing. It's disappointing and embarrassing. You don't necessarily want to see that if you're on Denver Nuggets and you're a fan of this team. So they just need to do a better job at obviously it's going to be tough to contain Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. So you just kind of have to live with the output that they're putting out there on display. Devin Booker has been a very, very efficient in this postseason. He's probably been one of the best players in this postseason so far. And then, of course, we all know what Kevin Durant is about coming this time of the year. There's no need to discuss what he's been doing out there on the floor. But every other guy, they got to do a good enough job at containing them. I'm looking at the score sheet right now. Kogi hasn't done anything. DeAndre Ayton, a guy who's supposed to be this team's X factor in the postseason, has pretty much been a no-show this entire series. Arguing with his teammates like Devin Booker and Chris Paul on the sidelines on the court. So there's not much going here. There's not much going for him in this series. He's getting outplayed heavily by Jokic. Cameron Payne sliding in for Chris Paul hasn't been doing much as well. But what really hurt these guys today in Game 4 was just Landry Shamet going off in that fourth quarter, hitting 4 threes. So that's just something you can't expect, and I don't expect that going forward for the rest of the series. But you just kind of need these guys to have one of those type of performances, and that's exactly what happened tonight. And so, if I'm a Denver Nuggets fan, I'm still in good shape.
How confident are you in the Nuggets?
On a scale from 1 to 10, I would probably say about like an 8. I feel like these two games are still winnable games, and like in every other postseason series, there's always been at least one team blowing some other team off the floor. In Boston, we saw it in Game 2. Golden State and Los Angeles, we've seen it in back-to-back games. New York and Miami, we've seen it in this last game. So I feel like none of these teams have had a convincing win so far. And so if there's a team that I feel like can have a convincing win or just win a game on the road, I'd put my money on the Denver Nuggets. I feel like, outside of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, somebody else has got to show up, and it's not going to be DeAndre Ayton. Chris Paul is injured, and I'm not going to trust Landry Shamet or Terrence Ross and TJ Warren to go off for any like about 10, 15 points in a road game or a home game. So for me, I'd probably say about an 8.
My thing is, it's like every day, every game, it's like we say, there's just no way these guys are going to win getting 80 from two guys, but it's like they still end up somehow doing it. So I'm just like, at what point are it's going to have to take one of those two guys having a bad game, because it feels like with those two guys, they're just so resilient in terms of their scoring. They're just going to keep putting up their 30s and 35s, and they have no answer for Devin Booker, who's in single coverage every time KD's on the floor with him, and they have no answers for him. It's like that level of consistent scoring versus you have Jokic, who's going to consistently put up his numbers. It doesn't matter what happens, versus hoping that Jamal Murray is on it that day. And I know Jamal Murray's been averaging, I think, 27 on good efficiency this postseason, but it's like you're hoping on two guys showing up from the Denver and their role players, and then hoping those two guys don't put up their 40 bombs. And it's just like, I don't know how confident I feel like in those guys just dropping the ball. I don't want to switch my pick, but I'm just like, these guys keep putting up these 30 pieces. It's like, damn, like, is anyone gonna stop them?
I mean, it's crazy, man. They gotta find a way out to stop Devin Booker. I mean, KD's KD, but Book getting 40, 39, 45, just pushing the pace on them, getting good shots, getting double teams, kicking out the shooters. And then KD's there with his 30, 35. And I feel like, the reason they won these last two games with those two guys, and then game four, Shaman showing up. But guys are going to start hitting three sooner or later. Guys are not going to be cold. Guys are not going to stand in this corner and just miss empty shots. But for me, I still feel like Denver's going to come out win this series, but they got to find a way to stop D-Book. I mean, I feel like it's any of these games are toss-ups, and I feel like the Suns, come out and win some way with these two guys leading the way. But I feel like Denver just got the more complete team still.
I mean, it's not. I feel like they're just not going to have an answer for the Suns scoring punch. Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are going to do their thing, and I've admitted that starting out this entire series. But what needs to happen going forward for these next 3 games is the Denver Nuggets, role players got to be better. Michael Porter Jr. hasn't been great this entire series. I believe he had 21 in game 3, but down the stretch, he was very cold. He hit a couple of baskets, but the game was out of reach at that point. So, what's always going to give the edge if you're going up against the Phoenix Suns is your depth. And right now, coming off the bench for the Denver Nuggets, guys aren't contributing. They have Jeff Green, Bruce Brown, and Chris Braun coming off the bench, and they're not really doing much. They combined for about 11 points tonight. That's just not going to it's just not going to work out. You got to be able to be better. I think they'll be better at home, but they do got to. At the end of the day, they do have to be better on the road. Or at some point, we're going to get to Game 7, and at that point, it's a coin toss. It just comes down to who really has it on that day. And Aaron Gordon has to be better. Michael Porter has to be better. KCP's got to be better. He's playing heavy minutes and not really, knocking down his shots because, I feel like Jokic and Murray are close. They're good enough to at least match or come close to the output that's being put out there from Devin Booker and KD. But at the end of the day, the Suns only have those two guys. The Denver Nuggets have a whole team, and they have to win as a collective unit. And right now, these last couple of games, it's really just been Jokic and Murray just carrying the load and putting on a show. And everybody else just kind of just watching and standing around and letting those guys go to work. And it's pretty much been 2-on-2 basketball. And then tonight, the Phoenix Suns were able to get, Landry Shamet's 19 bomb late in that fourth quarter. So still think they're in good shape, but I feel like right now this is going to come down to whose role players are going to play better between these two guys. And I think I'm going to go with the Denver Nuggets role players to be better for at least 2 out of these 3 games moving forward. But now we move on to the last series. We have the Golden State Warriors going up against the Los Angeles Lakers. This series sits 2-1 in the Los Angeles Lakers' favor. Game 1, the Los Angeles Lakers were able to steal this one on the road, 117-112. And then these last 2 games have been blowouts. Game 2 for the Warriors, 127-100. And then Game 3, 127-97. So what are we taking away from this series so far?
I think Anthony Davis, like we highlighted before the series started, is causing major problems for the Golden State Warriors. I mean, like, forget about just even offensively. Defensively, it's just been a huge issue. I mean, Game 1, the rim protection was just there from the jump. I mean, they were all over the Golden State Warriors. And in Game 2, they started trapping Steph, and then, that led to open shots, and Klay Thompson was hitting some tough shots still, but he was getting open, and a lot of guys were able to get to their spots, and JaMychal Green was wide open. And they adjusted Game 3. They put Reeves on Steph Curry, and then Vanderbilt was on, I believe, Klay, I want to say. And then
Draymond, he started off on Draymond.
Yeah, on Draymond, yeah. And then so they had Reeves on Steph, so he could follow him around. And I feel like that adjustment made a lot because Anthony Davis started playing high drop, so he started getting basically at the level of the ball handler. So if Steph Curry takes a screen, Anthony Davis, basically it's almost like a hedge. He's coming up mad high, and so he was able to play the ball handler and the roller immensely. I think that coverage that he had was just ridiculous. I think, and he's just been blowing up their actions. I'm always critical about Anthony Davis' offense, but if there's one thing I can never speak about is his defense, because, defensively, this guy, nobody rises higher in the playoffs defensively than he does, and so whatever he gives you on offense is just a bonus. It's just icing on the cake. And, offensively, he's been a problem for the Warriors. Whenever he dives to the paint, he's just too big to handle. Kevon Looney, last series, we saw how he was on the offensive glass. With Anthony Davis there, it's a whole different issue because Anthony Anthony Davis. He rebounds really well. He protects the glass. Rim protection is not just about blocks. It's just when guys drive, it deters them. Anthony Davis standing there. I can't count how many times people drive. They look up and Anthony Davis is waiting for them there. And even in a series where LeBron James, he literally even the first quarter didn't take a shot, and then he started to turn it up. But he even then he's able to take a backseat with the guys helping him out. D'Angelo Russell, he's been quietly having a strong series. In that last game, I believe he had 21 points. In the last game, he came out firing, and that's just created by LeBron James and these post ups that he has. And right now, the Warriors need a second guy to step up. And I really feel like that has to be Andrew Wiggins. When they have gone to Andrew Wiggins, I think they haven't really had an answer for him. When Andrew Wiggins is aggressive, I feel like that gives them the best chance. I understand Klay Thompson is the second guy for this team, and he had 30 points, but when you need to be able to get to the basket, and people crying about the free throw disparity, like you just have to watch the game. And even then, the last game, honestly, it wasn't even just like the free throw disparity. If you're watching that second quarter, the Warriors really looked like a JV basketball team. That second quarter, it was just an awful watch if you're from a Warriors standpoint, because they started Moses Moody grabbing the legs of Anthony Davis, the technical foul on Draymond Green, who was just bickering, and then the bench, I think, was it JaMychal Green that also got a technical foul. Just dumb mistakes, and guys getting blocked, and I just felt like the Warriors just really played into the Lakers' hands with Anthony Davis, and he's been their guy this series, and there's no reason for them to slow down. The keys for the Warriors is Andrew Wiggins has to be that guy for them. I feel like he has to be that secondary option, and he has to get going. And outside of Steph, guys have to hit their shots, so that's the key there.
Man, I'm extremely happy we up 2-1. Game one, Anthony Davis showed up big time for us offensively and defensively. 30, 23, 4 blocks. He played phenomenal down the drive, down that end of the game, down the stretch. LeBron had an okay game. Guys like D'Lo were showing up. Rui was playing fantastic. And it felt like game two, they kind of made the adjustments. We started trying to, trap Curry. They played Curry more on ball. He showed up, setting up teammates. They put in JaMychal Green to start that game too. And he was hitting the shots. He ended up with 15 points. Draymond had 11. Curry had 20. And when Klay's hot, and it's tough to stop Klay Thompson, man. He hit 8 of his threes, ended up with 30 points, and they blew us out the water. LeBron started off hot in the first half, 21 points, ended the game with 23. So second half, he wasn't really there. Offensively, wasn't much on the defensive side of the ball either. But we got to get AD going, and AD wasn't going that second game. So the inconsistency with him, every other game, it seems like, he plays one good game. The next game, it's a no-show. And the third game, he shows up again. And that's what happened for us game 3. Again, defensively, AD, one of the best defensive players in this playoffs, played phenomenally well on the defensive side of the ball. We made a defensive adjustment. Shout out to Ham for that. Put Reeves on Curry, put Vandy on Draymond, have AD guard JaMychal Green, and have LeBron on Wiggins and D'Lo on Klay. And it worked perfectly. We wanted Draymond to shoot. It was easy to switch with the Draymond and Vandy and Reeves switch. AD's helping right there. AD stepping up on the screens again, and the adjustments that we made defensively showed up in that game 3.
And I feel like you guys also have been attacking Klay defensively. I mean, D'Lo was getting
D'Lo the first quarter. He was attacking Klay every single time, and he had 13 points that first quarter again for us. And I feel like Klay Thompson's not the guy.
He's not there, yeah.
Yeah, not the guy he used to be defensively, but that's due to a lot of the injuries that he has the last couple of years with the Achilles, with the ACL. That's going to slow a lot of people down. He's still a great player, but, offensively for them, game 3, he wasn't there offensively. He shot 5 for 14. Jordan Poole shot 2 for 9. JaMychal Green was 1 for 6. Draymond Green had 2 points. I think Curry was 9 for 21. And they only hit 13 threes in that game 3 against us. And, offensively for us, we had 15 threes. We dominated the glass. Obviously, going the free throw discrepancy, a lot of people are going to mention that, but we're attacking the basket every single possession. We're playing physical. We're going after rebounds. We're attacking the paint. I feel like, them shooting 45 threes a game and us, attacking the paint more than them, it's going to show in the free throw discrepancy. So, defensively, man, I'm happy, the adjustments that we made, and hopefully, game 4, we got to counter their adjustment that they're going to make. But AD, man, big time, big chance for us to go 3-1. Game 4 at LA, you got to show up. I don't want that off game where you come in with 10 points and you just sit back. This time, assert yourself, be aggressive in the beginning, and we'll see what happens. But What'd you say, Abdi?
It's like AD has like a he has like the Bam syndrome. And what I mean by that, it's like AD's bad games are like his floor is like Bam. Like, Bam, like his quote unquote like regular games were like 18 and 12 with elite
Yeah.
defense, but it's just like where's like the scoring? And with Anthony Davis, you expect a higher level scoring than Bam. And like his best games, it's like this guy's like top 5 player on the planet. And it's like
32, 33 a
yeah,
game with
like it with
25
like
rebounds.
with 20 rebounds, like 5 blocks, and like defensively, you're gonna get Anthony Davis every single night. There's no question about it. Defensively. It's just like offensively, you just need a level of consistency. And some of that, of course, is like, you need guys to create for Anthony Davis. It's not like he's an Embiid or Jokic that's just gonna be like scoring for himself 24/7. Sometimes he needs guys to set up for himself. But other times it's like he needs to be aggressive and just get the ball. Like even in game 1, there was like I think for the first like 5 minutes, Anthony Davis didn't even touch the ball like at all, and that's when the Warriors made that run to start the game. And then Anthony Davis settled in, he started getting the ball more. It just really comes down to get him the ball and let him. He has to cook. He has to just be aggressive.
We got to involve him, especially in the pick and roll with D'Lo, Reeves, LeBron. He has to get the ball every time at that mid-range spot. Let him work from there. But sometimes he just pressures off to the side and goes to that baseline, just stands there, and then. He likes, sometimes he likes to play like a shooting guard. He settles for jump shots, settles for fadeaways. And I feel like, something, he's not aggressive. He's scared of that physicality sometimes. But then you see it that next game or that big game that he has. It's like, why can't he do this every single game? So I don't know, but I expect, hopefully that he comes in that, game 4 and just plays like a monster. That's what we need.
Man, watching this series, of course, on paper, it's a LeBron James versus Steph Curry, matchup. Is another one of those ones for the books, and you have the Lakers versus Golden State, and this is only a series where we've had 2 blowouts back-to-back games, and it's been tough to watch throughout the course of this series. In game 1, the Lakers came out. They took the Warriors' first punch, being on the road, being at home for Golden State. They were up like 10-2 start off the game, and Anthony Davis realized he had a Kevon Looney on him, and he just started to go to work. And so he really set the tone in game 1. And he didn't look back ever since. But I felt like even late in that game, the Warriors are still able to find some success down the stretch in that fourth quarter, which led them to go on that run to tie the game with that Steph Curry 3-pointer. And that was by going small, allowing Draymond Green to guard up on Anthony Davis and really force him to take some tough shots, and not really let Anthony Davis just kind of dribble up on in the mid-range spot and to allow him to get to his spots and stuff like that. But normally, of course, after an emotionally high win, for the Warriors, they always come down really tough and lose that next game. And that's kind of what happened in game 1. In a game they're supposed to win, they're supposed to protect home court. Coming off that game 7 win where all the emotions in the world are through the roof, and Steph Curry's 50-piece. These guys just came back down to earth and reality hit them in the face really hard. And the Lakers were able to capitalize on that. And although the free throws in that game were 29-6 in favor of the Los Angeles Lakers, if you were watching that game, you would understand that that's what was supposed to happen. The Lakers were the more aggressive team from start to finish. These guys were the ones that were attacking the basket consistently, and these guys were able to get to the line, and they're putting the pressure on the referees to make calls. And so I wasn't necessarily too mad about the free throws being the way they were coming out of game 1, because the Lakers were the more aggressive team, they're the more dominant team. It felt like every time the Warriors were driving in, with Anthony Davis being there in the paint, they would look up, just kick the ball to the open shooter, and then kind of just live with the 3-point ball that's been falling for them throughout the course of this playoffs. But at some point, I was telling myself after game 1, these guys just got to be able to attack the rim regardless of who's at inside the paint. Anthony Davis, hell of a player, hell of a defensive player, but you got to be able to put some pressure at the rim and at least get some shots in the paint. They weren't able to do that in game 1, and so in game 2, when things were looking pretty calm for the Warriors, when they were able to make their adjustments, Steve Kerr, I got to give him some credit there. Although the JaMychal Green sliding into the lineup wasn't necessarily his idea, but the adjustments coming out of game 2 were amazing. Coming out of game 1, going into game 2 were amazing. I think allowing Steph to be a true point guard, not necessarily forcing him to make these tough shots or force some shots to go down, really just making Steph be the playmaker that he is, the decision maker that he is. And he finished with the 20-12 game. And they're able to blow the Lakers out off the floor. But the free throws in that game were pretty close. It's 17 to, I believe, 16 for the Warriors. And so that was a blowout. And so I feel like whenever the free throws are close, the games are always going to be in favor of Golden State. But now we go ahead and move on to game 3. Man, it was the Warriors I felt like these guys were in cruise control for about a quarter and it's 5-6 minutes into going into that second quarter, up until that 7-minute mark where Steph Curry made a turnover, looking for Klay Thompson down on the fast break. Everything started to turn for the Los Angeles Lakers. And the one thing that changed was the game slowing down heavily. All these foul calls going in favor of Los Angeles, all these ticky-tack fouls, really slowing down the game, putting guys like Draymond Green in foul trouble early on. I think Draymond Green finished with like 3 fouls going into halftime, really not being out there on the floor. It's gonna be tough to win games when one of your best defensive anchors is out there on the bench, just having to bicker with the referees, because what more can Draymond do at that point? He can't be out there on the floor because, with the Lakers and their size and their physicality, with the way the referees are refereeing this game, it's like, a fourth foul could happen at any given moment. So the Warriors have to be smart in that situation and just kind of have Draymond Green just sit out and then just have him be ready to go start the second half. But when the game was not being dictated by the officials, and they weren't necessarily having their imprint on the game, when they're slowing down the game, the Warriors are going to be the better team in this situation. When the game is not being dictated by the officials, the Warriors will be just fine. But every time the officials get involved, it's just ridiculous, because how do you come out of game 3 with the free throw discrepancy of 37 to 17? And I believe the Lakers shot about 25 or 23 free throws at the half. It's like, it's just ridiculous at this point, because I understand that the Lakers are the more physical team inside the paint. They're the ones that are getting to the basket, but at some point you just can't necessarily call these ticky-tack fouls, which, although they might not seem much in the moment, but when these guys are in the bonus with about 8-9 minutes left to go in the quarter, every other ticky-tack foul is going to be 2 free throws, and then next thing you know, the Warriors have the ball. So, I think the officials got to be better. At some point, you got to let these two teams play. We're not trying to watch these guys, live at the free throw line, and that's about it. Like, why are we watching these two teams just have a free throw off if that's, what we're not watching? We're not paying, and we're not trying to watch that in the postseason. So, my question for me is just kind of like, at some point, when are we going to let these two teams play it out? When are the officials going to let these two teams just battle it out and let these two teams just be tough? And it's kind of, sometimes you kind of have to let things go and you have to call what has to be called. But the free throws looking like the way they are in these first 3 games, it's just flat out embarrassing. It's embarrassing to watch. And I feel like, with the game slowing down a lot in that second quarter, although the Warriors did play a part in that, for 7 minutes in that second quarter, these guys were downright terrible. I think they only hit 1 field goal. They're pretty much living at the line. But I think they had like 6 to 7 free throw attempts in that second quarter, and that's pretty much majority of their points came from that. But it's just going to be tough for the Warriors to stop, the Lakers, if each and every other play is just going to be a foul, with the referees blowing the whistle and stopping the game. And so right now, the Warriors, they have to come out in game 4 with a sense of urgency. These guys have to understand that, Steph Curry is going to beat him. Klay Thompson is going to do his thing, but Andrew Wiggins, defensively, he's bringing it, but I feel like offensively, he could still do a lot more. And if they just kind of have that same mentality they did coming into game 2, I think game 4 they'll be in good shape, because the Lakers aren't necessarily a good 3-point shooting team, and in game 3 they're able to outshoot the Warriors. So I don't think that'll be the case going forward in this series. And so they just kind of have to live with these guys shooting these shots. Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell and Dennis Schroeder, Rui, these guys knocking down 3-pointers. Some games you're going to live with that. Some games you're just going to have to, you're going to be on the right side of things. And so, in game 3, that wasn't the case. The Lakers were able to be the better 3-pointer shooting team. But, my major concern coming out of these 3 games is just, these officials got to be better. When the free throws are close, the Warriors are going to always be in favor, because that's their style of basketball. They're not necessarily relying on the referees to make all these tough calls, but the Lakers are doing all of that. And I understand that the Lakers are the more physical team, and they're trying to, put their will on the game and stuff like that. But in game 2, when the free throws were close, the Warriors did a good enough job at taking away Anthony Davis early. He didn't necessarily have it going like he did in game 1. And that was an adjustment made by Steve Kerr by starting off the game with Draymond on him. But if Draymond is not on Anthony Davis, it's going to be open season for any other guy. Anthony Davis is going to flat out dominate the game. And for however many minutes Draymond Green's off the floor, the Lakers will always be plus whatever the score is. So going into game 4 and the rest of this series, the Warriors just got to not let the referees get in their head and kind of just let the game be how it is. But this free throws being the way they are. Game one, I was cool with, and then game two, it was close. So no complaints there. But game three, especially with the Warriors coming out dominating for that first quarter and 6 minutes into that second quarter, and the next thing you know, all these ticky-tack fouls being called. It's just going to be tough to watch and tough to enjoy because it's not good brand of basketball being put out there on display. So, game four is a must win for the Warriors, no matter which way you cut the cake. I don't care what Steve Kerr says, talking about, the officials weren't the problem. They weren't the reason that they lost. It is what it is, but they got to be better in game four and at least try to steal back home court advantage going into game five. Because if they come out of Los Angeles 3-1, it's going to raise a lot of questions whether or not this team's going to be able to come back down from 3-1. Although they have, for the rest of those 3 games, they do have home court advantage, but it's just going to be tough to stop LeBron James in any closeout situation. So you want to avoid that whatsoever. And so I think they'll be able to do that. They'll take care of business in game 4 and then, let the chips fall where they may in game 5. But that pretty much wraps up the takeaways from second round of the playoffs so far. One thing I do want to talk about today is, the Milwaukee Bucks, after getting their butts kicked by the Miami Heat in that first round 4-1, decided that it was best to fire their head coach, Mike Budenholzer, after everything that he was going through in that series with his brother dying in a car accident, I believe, midway through that series. So I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on how we feel about that firing.
Right move, wrong timing, in my opinion. I think they probably should have waited like a couple more weeks. I feel like that just the timing of that seemed kind of off. I mean, it was a justified move. I mean, Budenholzer, the lack of adjustments was just appalling. There's just no excuse for an 8th seed to beat a number 1 seed. Just to let Jimmy Butler play one-on-one constantly, to constantly be in drop coverage and let one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the Heat, in Miami Heat, absolutely torch you from outside. It's just there was just no adjustments made for that. The lack of timeouts. I mean, that one game when they were up almost 11 and the Heat came back and there's just no timeouts in that situation. And again, it just felt like he just wasn't in it. And I feel like this was a time for both parties to part ways. Do I agree with the timing? Not really, but it was a move that was on the way if they had failed. And to do it in this fashion where you lose in the first round and you absolutely choked an 8th seed, I think it was the right move for these guys.
Yeah, I agree with Abdi. I think it was right move, wrong timing. I feel like we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about how Bud. I put Bud as one of my guys that has the most playoff pressure as a coach, and I feel like that run they had in 2021 where they won the finals. It was to me. It wasn't too much of a great run to me, and I put him on the pedestal. I felt like the calls that he was making down the line, the adjustments that he was not making down the line against Spoelstra, letting multiple comebacks happen, not making the defensive adjustment with Giannis switching to Butler, it was just everything offensively. It was just out of stone. Jrue Holiday was not there much on the offensive side due to him chasing Jimmy Butler a lot of the time. Middleton's inconsistency, and I feel like a lot of it fell back on Bud. So good, right move, wrong timing. I don't know what they're gonna do this offseason. They got Brook Lopez as a free agent. They got Chris Middleton as a free agent. They got some moves to make. They got some players to re-sign or not. I don't know their cap situation, and we'll see what Giannis wants to do with them. So they got a lot of stuff going into this offseason. They got to find the right coach for this team, and let's see if they bring back a couple of the key players they had last year. But we'll see what happens.
I mean, I'm not a fan of this whatsoever. Although these guys were able to sneak away with a championship a couple years ago, due to the fact that of course the Nets were injured and Kevin Durant's foot was on the line in that Game 7. But I mean, although he did get out coached in this series, and it's a bad look, 1 seed losing to the 8th seed in 4-1 fashion. I feel like the Milwaukee Bucks this is kind of like a panic move. This is kind of like just an impulse move. I feel like, regardless of what happened in that series, you kind of just wash it down and just move on to the next season and plan out a more constructive plan for the next year. And this isn't the first time the Milwaukee Bucks have gotten embarrassed in the postseason. I think we've seen it in the bubble. They lost to the same Miami Heat team, in the bubble. And Giannis, the one thing that I could take away from both those series is, Giannis was missing games. So he missed time in both those series, and the Milwaukee Bucks weren't able to win. And so, Budenholzer going through what he went through in this past postseason, I feel like, the Milwaukee Bucks didn't do right by him whatsoever. This guy was still the coach when they won a championship, and although they weren't able to win last year, Chris Middleton did go down, and then losing this year with Giannis missing with some time in this series. These guys should have just kind of just trusted their head coach, trusted the system, and kind of just move forward into next year. Because right now, what are the Milwaukee Bucks going to do in terms of looking for a new head coach? Who are they going to target to replace Mike Budenholzer to kind of just take him over the top, I guess, once again? Because Budenholzer was able to do that a couple of years ago, and then now you're going to this offseason with a head coaching search, and you got to find the right guy. And it's tough finding a great head coach that can lead your team to a championship. And the Milwaukee Bucks, they're a team that's always going to be the top dogs in the Eastern Conference. And although they had some bumps in the road this year, I don't think that'll be the case going into next year. But it's always going to be a year-to-year basis how we judge this Milwaukee Bucks team, just based on the fact that this roster is not built for the future. They're just pretty much in win now mode, and they're trying to squeeze out whatever championships they can in this small window that they got. And so I think Mike Budenholzer was the guy that they could have done it with, but now that they go into a job head coaching search for a guy that can lead the way, I just don't know what that next head coach can bring out of this Bucks team that Mike Budenholzer couldn't do. And so, it could be right, it could be right move, wrong timing, but if you're gonna make this move, you should have made this move a long time ago, even with Mike Budenholzer winning you a championship. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. The Milwaukee Bucks did what they did. They fired him, and now they go into this offseason looking for a new head coach that could, take this team to another championship with this window that they got. But with that being said, that pretty much wraps up today's episode. Any final words before we sign off here?
Man, we got a lot of basketball left to play, man. There's a lot of basketball. We ain't done yet.
Big game 4 tomorrow, man. I can't wait for that, man. Let's go Lakers.
We got a lot of games, a lot of playoff basketball left to be played. A lot of interesting games that can, sway in any team's favor. It's going to be interesting to see, interesting to watch. And of course, we'll be right here to cover it all. But with that being said, we'll go ahead and close things out here. With that being said, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really appreciate your love and support. We'd greatly appreciate it if you like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at New Media Podcast. And for those of you that are watching us on YouTube, our lower social media handles will be at the end of this video. And if you're listening to us on Apple and Spotify, if you go to our Instagram page at New Media Podcast, you'll be able to navigate yourself to all of our social media handles there. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Record a new hit, then we making us a film. Wouldn't sign a deal if I got a couple mil. Been in the lab, now they throwing out deals. Me and now Lakes, now that's overkill.